Yishai?
Oh, wait there. Okay. The YouTube one is.
Joseph Malka says that on YouTube it says live in 2 hours.
Yeah, I'm just fixing that now.
No worries.
There we go.
There now follows an official announcement from the London Mint Office and the Royal Air Force. 18.
Okay. Hopefully, in about 2 seconds, we'll be finished with an advert on YouTube, and then we can go straight to the perfect. We're live on all channels. If people could just let us know in the comments or in the live chat whether they can see us, that would be fantastic. So we've got 9 watching on YouTube, and it doesn't look like anyone on Facebook yet, but just check that anyway. Okay, I'm going to assume now we're live. Actually 2 minutes. So I've done this before and not been live on every channel. Yeah, perfect. We're live. We're live across the board. Perfect. Okay, so hello, welcome. Sorry about the slight delay. It's the least professional podcast you'll find on the internet. My name's Joseph. I'm from the Israel Advocacy Movement, and I am super excited today to have 2 of my idols, role models, Zionist inspirations, who, while both sitting in the Zionist camp, while both sitting in the Jewish camp, have slightly differing views when it comes to Israel. Or certainly when it comes to the settlements, or maybe they'll have different views, maybe they'll have the same views. We're about to find out. So I've got Hen Mazzig. Actually, what I'm going to do, I found there was a fantastic introduction. I really don't like intros; they long out the debate. I just like to get straight to the blood sports of the actual debate itself. And I stumbled across a very succinct introduction to both of you. So I will just share my screen. Can you see my screen?
We can, yeah.
Perfect.
Cool.
There we go.
All of them.
All. So here we go. So I don't know Ben Rafe, but he said in one corner, the international spokesperson for the extremist Hebron settlers, and in the other corner, a government-funded propagandist and social media influencer. Now, anybody who knows the 2 panelists knows what absolute insanity this is. Both of them are incredibly accomplished Zionist speakers, writing for various publications, going on various news outlets, and neither are extremists, and neither, to my knowledge, are government-funded propagandists. But I thought this was I don't know, Ben Trafe. It was possibly the worst introduction to the debate I could have found. So I thought I'd use his intro rather than waiting for coming up with my own. And what I'd like to jump straight into is, whatever you do, please head over to Twitter. Make sure that you're following Hen Mazzig, Yishai Fleisher, and us, the Israel Advocacy Movement. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to, just for the audience, for those that aren't familiar with either of our 2 speakers, what I'm going to do, I'm going to run through a very quick fire round of questions and ask them both to respond to each of these questions with a simple agree or disagree. So the first question is, there is no such thing as a Palestinian. Either of you would like to say agree or disagree?
I disagree.
Yishai?
Yeah, I also disagree. Of course there's a Palestinian. Perfect. There's all kinds of Palestinians, in fact. I guess we'll talk about that.
Exactly. Jerusalem is the undivided capital of Israel.
I feel good about that.
Yeah, I agree.
I am a Zionist.
Yeah.
It's our lives, I think.
Yeah.
The settlements are an obstacle to peace.
A solution to peace.
I think it's an obstacle to peace.
Perfect. And that frames the debate perfectly. And so what I'd like to jump straight into is, I can stop sharing my screen, is asking either of you to go first on that final point. The settlements being an obstacle to peace. And you seem to be on different camps to that solution. So either whoever would like to go first, the floor is yours.
I don't mind to go first. Yeah.
Go ahead, Hen.
Okay, so thank you for inviting me, and I do think that it's important to have this discussion, and even if we disagree, to at least bring up those ideas and allow this discussion for people that are outside of Israel, also people in Israel. My personal belief is that the settlements do harm peace, and it's something that not only Israelis, I mean, friends of Israel around the world agree about it. People like Barack Obama that said that on the ground they are making it impossible, or at least very difficult to ever achieve peace. Ariel Sharon, Israeli Prime Minister, said, "You may not like the word, but what is happening is an occupation. It is disaster for Israel and the Palestinians." He said it in 2003. And I think that it's something that really pushes peace away, because it makes it really impossible to have a two-state solution. And the only path that I think for me as a Zionist that speaks out every day about my national rights and how my national rights is not something that is up for debate, to tell a group of people that their national rights are up for debate, and that we need to have a conversation about whether or not they deserve to have a country of their own. While I'm speaking all about how self-determination for the Jewish people is the most important thing, I think that I find it very, I find it hypocritical to be the ones that are, arguing with anti-Zionists and seeing how horrible it is for people to deny our basic human rights, and then do it on the other side of our mouth. The second point that is that I think that besides only Friends of Israel, Israelis think so too. I Googled a few polls on Israelis, what they think about the settlements. So in 2003, sorry, I'll move forward. Ariel University, 2011, Ariel University, that is located in Ariel, that is part of, I think that the main settlement blocks, it's not what I think, it's in the Oslo Accords that the main settlement blocks are going to be part of Israel. We all know that this is going to happen when peace will happen, hopefully. But Ariel is located in one of those blocks, and Ariel University, they found that 54% of Israelis support withdrawal from the West Bank for peace. In 2017, a poll by the Institute for National Security found that 49% of Israelis support pull out of the settlements outside the major blocks that I mentioned, and the 10% support pulling out of all settlements. Channel 12 did a poll in June 2020 that found that 46% of Israeli public opposes annexation, only 34% supported. So almost half of Israelis oppose annexation. And they asked them also what's important for the Israeli public, and that's something that I can tell you as an Israeli, that the most important thing for us is the economy. 50% of them said that the economy is most important. 25% said that health is the second one, and 17% said security. Only 3% of Israelis thought that annexation is relevant to their lives, and that's also important to remember. Manu Geva did a polling. Manu Geva is like the Gallup in Israel. Manu Geva and Minat Tzemach, and they found that only 32% of Israelis support annexation if it will happen, and that 41% oppose it. 26% don't know, and they also asked them if they think it will help peace, and 47.9% said that it will harm peace. 47.9% of Israelis think that it will harm peace. So I'm not here speaking only on my behalf, as I showed continuously. Every year, Israelis, at least almost half of Israel are opposing settlements, and another 25% are on the fence on it. Only minority are supporting this idea, and I think it's because it really harms the Zionist dream. It harms young Israelis, young Israeli Jews and non-Jews to think that our country can go into a place that we will not allow other people to live freely. Or to have their national rights, or because if you want a one state, it will have to mean that Palestinians will not be equal, and if they won't be equal in a one state, they won't be equal, or Jews will not be equal. One side will not be equal, and that's my biggest fear. And I think it also pushes a lot of young Jewish Zionists away from the debate, and that's something that I would really like to point out. I think that a lot of times, and that's something that I'm seeing. Every time young Zionist Jews criticize the settlement, immediately we're getting a pushback, as if you criticize the settlement movement and you're speaking about violence in the settlements, or you're saying that you oppose them, you become this anti-Zionist Jew, and you're not. I mean, so many Jews are Zionists and will support Israel. I know all of them. I'm working with them around the world, from the UK to the US. You can criticize the settlement and oppose them and still be a very strong Zionist and believe that this is the way that Israel should go. And I don't think that we should push those people away and shutting them. And the last point that I want to make before I'm giving it to Shai, I think that the recent peace agreement with started with the United Arab Emirates and then Bahrain and then Sudan recently. Those peace agreements have proven to us that with annexation, we will not have peace. We have peace in our time only because Israel agreed to not go on with the settlement annexation. That's something that United Arab Emirates emphasized, all the countries that joined this peace agreement emphasized that if there would be annexation, which was what Netanyahu promised in the beginning, and now we saw how it changed, if annexation would have continued, we would not have peace with 3 Arab countries, which is historic. So I think, I really want to see peace, and I want to see peace in the Middle East. But I think that if we, I know that if we'll continue with the settlement, and if we'll talk about annexation, and we'll talk about one state, it will inevitably mean that one group of people would be discriminated against. So for me, I think that peace is the most important thing, and I do think that settlements harm it. And it's and I'll give the floor to Yishai just with this question: do you think that this peace agreements would have happened with annexation?
Great. Okay, Joseph, I can take over. I don't hear you, Joseph. You're muted, but okay. First,
100%.
First thing, it's great to be on this platform with you guys, and I really respect the both of you a lot. Joseph, you're doing great videos, and Hen, you're like a superstar of Zionism. And really, the truth is that I would love to convince you, Hen. Can I call you Hen as opposed to Hen, or is that cool?
Yeah, please call me Hen.
Yeah. So I would love to convince you of a different position, or at least to consider. And that's what I call winning, by the way, in an argument, is just to get another person to just consider the other side. And I think you made your case very well. Before we even go on, I just want to first say Mazal Tov. Today is a minor holiday for the Jewish people. A lot of people don't know about it. But in the year 1165, Maimonides, the Rambam, a great Jew that came from Spain and then North Africa and then came to the land of Israel for a little bit, then made the rest of his life in Egypt, and he was the great philosopher, doctor, rabbi, and codifier. He came to the land of Israel in the year 1165, exactly during these months that we're in right now. And he writes a letter, which is quoted in a few different places, and he says, on the 6th of Cheshvan, I went up to the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. And then after that, I traveled to Hebron, and on the 9th of Cheshvan, in the year 1165, I kissed the tomb of the forefathers and mothers. I saw a Jewish community there, and my prayers were fulfilled that I was able to go and go to Hebron, to the tomb of the forefathers and mothers, because if people don't know, the patriarchs, the founders of our people, Abraham, and the matriarchs, Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah, Jacob and Leah, are buried in Hebron. And the Torah, the Bible, chapter 23, lays out the whole story about how Abraham purchases a plot of land from the Hittites. And that makes it into a tomb monument for perpetuity, for eternity. And Hebron is later on going to be the capital of Judea. King David is going to rule there for 7 years. And then about 2,000 years ago, King Herod, who was a weird but still a Jewish king, built an amazing monument there for the forefathers and mothers. It stands there today in perfect. It's never been hurt. It's exactly the way it was originally created. It's been added on to by various Christian and Muslim rulers of the land. But in 1165, under the Crusaders, they were ruling the land. The Rambam Maimonides came, Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon, and he writes this letter, and we have it to this very day. Last year, I had my daughter's bat mitzvah at the tomb of the patriarchs and matriarchs in Hebron, exactly on this day, the 9th of Cheshvan, which is tonight. We celebrate now from, I'm not going to do the math, but from 1165 to now, the 700 and some years that the Rambam came, and that's when we did the bat mitzvah. Now, for the bat mitzvah, I wanted fireworks because my mom is a Russian Jew, And for her, celebrations have fireworks. So she kept pushing me for fireworks and fireworks and fireworks. And I just, I didn't know how to do it. The army wouldn't let me do it. The Jews were too expensive, everybody that I turned to. So then suddenly I'm like, wait a minute. Right behind the Tomb of the Patriarchs and Matriarchs is a neighborhood of very friendly Arabs to the Jewish community. That's the Ja'abri neighborhood, Ja'abri. And I have a good friend there. He's the sheikh, he's the muhtar, the head of the tribe. His name is Hajj Ashraf Ja'abri. And he's the guy that went to Bahrain. Remember that big economic summit in Bahrain, Peace to Prosperity. And we basically got him to go there. We put him on the map as a pro-Israel Palestinian who really wants to move forward. Anyway, I reached out to him. I said, Ashraf, Hajj Ashraf. Hajj means that he went to Mecca and Medina on the Hajj. I said to him, Hajj Ashraf, can you do me a favor? I want you to fire off some fireworks for my daughter's bat mitzvah. He said, do you want me to buy you some fireworks? I'm like, no, man. I want you to buy them, and I want you to shoot them for me. You guys are great shooters of fireworks, and you live right next to the Tomb of the Patriarchs and Matriarchs. I want you to fire them over the area that we're dancing at a certain time. He was so excited by this. He said to me, fine, you pay for the fireworks. I'll explain to you what we have to do, but you're not paying 1 penny more, 1 shekel more, because I'm going to take the cost of making it happen upon myself. And we had the most beautiful bat mitzvah. Celebrating my daughter's bat mitzvah, celebrating 700 plus years of the Rambam, the Maimonides in Hebron, and my Arab friends shot the most incredible 5 to 7 minute display of fireworks you ever seen, and certainly ever seen in Hebron. So that's just an example of both our relating to our history, connecting with our past, living where we've always lived. We've lived in Hebron almost without stop for the last 3,000 years, except for a few times when some evil people kicked us out and made the town Judenrein. Other than that, we've always lived in Hebron, and we've always had relations with our neighbors. And that's exactly what just happened last year before Corona at this time. So for me, the word Hebron, which in Hebrew and in Arabic they call it Khalil, it means the same thing, which is friendship, which is connection. The Jewish people have a deep, unstoppable, uninterrupted connection to this land. The whole thing about Zionism is that we're returning to our ancestral homeland. And the places that bespeak of our ancestral homeland are places like Bethel, Beit El, Hebron, Jerusalem, Shiloh, Shechem, Beit Lechem. These are the places, Bethlehem, these are the places that make up the story of the Jewish people. So if we base Zionism on our history, it didn't really happen in Tel Aviv. That was a lot of times that was the places where in different times the Philistines were living. But the places that are identified with Jews coming from Judea, what the Persians called Yehud Medinta, which is the state of the Jews, was always Judea. The Maccabees controlled this mountain range until they expanded some more. This was the heart of the Jewish story. We've had 2 commonwealths here, and now we're back. Now what happened is that this land was allotted to be Jewish from the get-go. It was recognized by both the San Remo Accords and the League of Nations, and certainly before that in the Balfour Declaration, as being Jewish and much more. But the heart of the Jewish people, everybody knew that Hebron, Jerusalem, is the heart of the Jewish people. What happened is that a place like Hebron was actually ethnically cleansed from its Jews by a horrific jihadist riot in 1929, stirred up by a dude named Hajj Amin el-Husseini, who was a Nazi sympathizer at the time, later became a full-fledged Nazi and helped kill off the Jews in Bosnia. He was a very bad man. And he got rid of the Jews in 1929 from Hebron. In 1948, when we declared our tiny little Jewish ethnic national state, our little Jewish homeland for the Jewish people, right? A Jewish autonomy in an Arab Middle East, we were attacked by 6 Arab armies. And we fought and we won our independence. But when we won our independence, we lost the heartland, including the Western Wall, the Temple Mount, including places like Shechem and Hebron and Bethlehem. We lost it to the Jordanians, who were a recently created British offshoot. When the British wanted to reward their Hashemite friends, they helped them create a few different kingdoms in Iraq and in Jordan. The Iraqi one and the Saudi one, they lost all those kingdoms to other Arabs who kicked them out. But in the story of Jordan, they held on. And what they did is they ethnically cleansed Jews from places like Gush Etzion, from Jerusalem, the old city, and from Hebron. They didn't allow, they had already been cleansed in 29. They didn't allow any new Jews to come in. Well, that was the state of affairs, a sad state of affairs, that we had lost the justice of our land until 1967. The Six-Day War, not only did we push back Jordan, we also pushed back Egypt from Gaza and from the Sinai. We pushed back Syria from the Golan Heights. These were the essential parts of our homeland. But the essential, the heartland of the homeland was Judea and Samaria. And so there ensued a debate about what we should do with these lands. And it was a vociferous debate of which my colleague Hen is still part of today. And I totally understand his position. But the fact is that today, 600,000 Jews live in Judea and Samaria. It's now almost 20 years that we've had nationalist governments, and all the governments of Israel have supported. So you could talk to me about polls all day long. The greatest poll in politics is the elections. And if the governments of Israel are supporting the Jewish communities of Judea and Samaria, the heartland communities, that's the biggest poll of them all. And speaking of polls, you named a lot of interesting Jewish polls. But just today, as providential to help me defend the case, Professor Khalil Shikaki, very famous guy of the Palestinian Center for Policy and Survey Research, came out with figures which I've been blasting all over Twitter today, which is that only 27% of Palestinians believe in a two-state solution, and only 36% of Israelis. And do you know why? Because the two-state solution has been tried in various forms, and every single time it failed. Every time we pulled out of our land, we gave the appetite to the jihad to try to take more. People already don't remember what happened in the late 90s and the early 2000s. They don't remember that we pulled out of Judea and Samaria and then we had to fight a war to recontrol those areas because terrorism came from those places and blew up buses in Jerusalem. I mean, when we say blow up buses, can you just for a second imagine what it is to have a charred, broken sister or daughter? To me, that keeps me up at night, these thoughts. And that's what was happening all over Tel Aviv and Jerusalem because the PLO and the Palestinian Authority were holding on to this land and were using the brainwashing their population and turning them into terrorists. And much more recently, in 2005, we remember what happened with the Gaza withdrawal. We withdrew from Gaza. We gave them the land. But what happened? Hamas took over violently, and now every day we find terror tunnels, balloons, etc., etc. We fought 3 wars in that land. Therefore, without studying a lot of Rav Kook, the Israeli population has become much more pro our holding on to Judea and Samaria. They realize that the creation of a two-state solution just means the creation of a terrorist state next door. It's been proven. It's been proven. And that's why Shikaki is showing you that the figures that Hen said are just inaccurate. That is not what people believe in today. And finally, I'll finish this off with, I guess, I believe that we have every justice, every right to live in this land. It's our land. There has never been a Palestinian state. There are maybe people who self-identify as Palestinians, as you asked in the beginning. Sure there are. But there has never been a Palestinian state here. But if there has ever been a Palestine, it was also in different times of history a Jewish Palestine. But all that, let's leave all the justice aside and just for a second focus on security, which is not my main argument. But when I was sitting in the White House in the executive office building, presenting to them why we should never pull out of Hebron, I showed them this 3D map. Okay, you can't see it because of the background. This 3D map shows the mountainous range of the land of Israel, which is the heartland. And I said to them, if you want to create another Gaza right next to Jerusalem, just pull out of Hebron, because Hebron is controlled by Hamas. Pull out of Hebron, and you will have a Gaza Strip-like entity controlling this area, and it will shoot at the rest of the country. And that was like, they just stopped talking to me about it. I'm like, it's an absurd idea to give any other nationality, any other people control over this land. And I'll finish with this last phrase, which is Hen is the right way to pronounce it, asked me directly. He said, would we have a peace with the UAE? Now, anybody who follows me knows that I am like Mr. Abraham Accords. I am all about relations with the UAE and Bahrain, Sudan, etc. I'm all into it. All right. Would we have relations? I think you're reading the map a little bit backwards. What has been clearly shown by the Trump administration is that they're not going to pull out any Jews out of Judea and Samaria. The Pompeo doctrine accepts Jewish rights in Judea and Samaria. We're not going anywhere. And Netanyahu himself has said, yeah, I told them I'll for the sake of their lip service to the Palestinian cause, I'll tell them that we're not, annexing any more land. But we just got more green lights to build 5,000 new homes in Judea and Samaria. So the facts speak for themselves. The Jewish people are back home. We're living an incredible time, and I am very proud to be living in the heartland of the Holy Land.
Wow. It was really, really interesting to hear both of you speak. What I'll do, I'll open it up to both of you to respond to each other, but if possible, I'd like you to address one question that I have. And one thing that came throughout the conversation was, despite Ben Treif's comments, you're both incredibly moderate. You see your Palestinian neighbors as humans, as friends. There's no extremism on either side. It's just a different I'd imagine, path to peace that you both envisage. And so my question is really simple. And please feel free to respond to each other's comments. But what I would like the fact, if possible, if you could factor into your answer, what happens to the 600,000 Jewish settlers that live in the West Bank and Judea and Samaria, in whichever pathway to peace you envisage, Hen? And Yishai, for you, what happens to the 2.5 to 3 million Palestinian Arabs that live in the same region in your? Because I think it's really important for the audience to understand what is the biggest challenge within either visions. So please, the floor is now both of yours again.
Yeah, I'd love to respond to some of the points that were made. I mean, I gave polls from different sources, from right wing to left wing, Israeli polls and pollsters that are the most respected in Israel. And I think that it's talking about the Israeli public that hasn't changed since 2011 consecutively. And I just want to comment about the point of terrorism. I mean, I'll try. I wrote down a few points that I want to touch on. First of all, I do know what terrorism is. I've experienced it when I was 12 years old. I was almost killed in a terror attack right by my house in Petah Tikva, in an ice cream shop that I was about to go into that blew up. So I know full well what it is to almost lose your life because of it, and what it is to lose friends because of it. And I served in Hebron, as you know, and in Hebron and Ramallah and Jerusalem periphery, and I've had friends that I've lost because of this war. And of course, I want to see peace, and I want my family to be secure. I have hundreds of family members because we're Iraqi and Tunisians, and we just bring a lot of children. But as you said, you're not a security expert, and I'm not a security expert. 5 years in the IDF doesn't give me the security expertise. So I'm looking at Israeli generals and former generals, and there's 304 commanders for Israel security. It's an organization that I encourage everyone to Google, Commanders for Israel Security, and they wrote a whole paper of 400 pages of them outlining why the settlements are actually harming Israel's security. And those are not lower ranked officers. They are all from brigadier general and upward. So you have generals, you have former heads of Mossad and former heads of Shabak. And, I think that they probably have better security expertise than the both of us together. I also want to touch on the point of Jews being indigenous to Israel and Hebron. There's no argument here. I mean, Jews came from Hebron. We are absolutely been in Hebron, living there for thousands of years. But peace is about compromising, and it's about understanding that there's realities that we have to take into account. And we, giving up some land for peace is something that we can do. And we did it with Egypt, by the way, when we gave 2/3 of the size of Israel. We gave the Sinai Peninsula to Egypt, and we have peace agreement with them until now that we all celebrate. And I think that's something that we need to bear into account. And also, as you said, Joseph, there's 2 to 3 million Palestinian civilians living in the West Bank that we need to take into account. And you spoke about Sheikh Jabari, that I know him as well, but he's by far, and you know that as well, he doesn't represent the Palestinian population. He has, he's very, in his opinions, is very extreme. He has, the Palestinian Authority hates him, and they're fighting all the time because of his opinions. But his opinions, I think Sheikh Jabari, for me, is like when anti-Zionists want to bring an anti-Zionist Jew and telling us, here's the Jew that is against Israel. He's great. We can work with him. He's fantastic. Of course, he's great and he's pro-Israel, but his opinions do not represent, as you said, 30% of Palestinians. I mean, while they don't believe in two-state solution, that even if they don't believe in two-state solution, they don't want to live under Israel, at least from my experience. I just want to say, and I want to also touch on one thing that I've looked up. I mean, things that I wanted to really understand your agenda, and there was one thing that you said for the Atlantic in a documentary that they did about settlements, and the journalist asked you, can Palestinian citizens of Israel be equal to Jews? And you responded, and I'm directly quoting you, no, not in my opinion. I don't deny democratic principle. I just say they have to yield. And I think that a lot of times when I hear settlement leaders praising Palestinians, it's only Palestinians that are willing to subscribe to your ideology, and otherwise they will be dismissed and called out as irrelevant. And the ones that will be celebrated are the ones that will celebrate our point of view. Do you think that you find it problematic? Because do you think that people think that this is a way for two people to live together? And what do you envision as a peaceful solution in a one-state solution, which I understand that you're supporting? My family came to Israel from Iraq and Tunisia. I know exactly what it means to live as a minority under the control of a majority. Arab majority, Muslim majority, in respectively. It wasn't good for them. I don't want that. I don't want it to anyone else. And if I want to advocate for my national rights and my self-determination, I can't do it and ignore 2 to 3 million people on the other side.
Okay, I mean, I think it's a fair point, and I guess the elephant in the room is the question of what to do with the Arabs that live in Judea and Samaria under a different idea than chopping up our land in half and helping create what is obviously going to be a terror state next door. That's already an empirical, proven, tested and proven fact. So maybe we should think differently, and that's why probably the percentages, and that's what Shikaki is saying, are going down, because they see it's not really happening. And let's remember also that the Palestinian Authority is corrupt. We're talking Mahmoud Abbas has known $100 million in his personal bank and flies around in a private jet, but asks for money for the poor Palestinians. We know. And if you ask, you don't even need any polls. You just go to the Palestinian street and ask them, what do you think? What do you think about the Palestinian Authority? They will just start saying the worst things. They call them, in Hebrew, they call them the mushhatim, the corrupt ones. The corrupt ones. They call Ramallah the city of thieves, et cetera, et cetera. So we know what they really think about it. And when I let's put it that way, when I meet Arab Palestinians, and I meet them very regularly, and we have regular meetings all the time in Hebron. It's just not something we publicize because they're afraid to have their identity known, lest the Palestinian Authority uses its mukhabarat, its security services, to punish them by torturing them in their jails, like in Jericho. Like my friend Muhammad Jabir was jailed and tortured for 60 days for showing a picture of himself and Knesset member Yehuda Glick. So the first thing I like to say is, please do me a favor and don't, not you, Chen, I'm not talking to you directly, I'm talking to the audience, which is, please do me a favor and don't sell me that the two-state solution is some kind of beautiful, idyllic democracy. It's really not. It created a thugocracy, which is a real term these days, which is a thuggish, a controlling organization that is really repressing the rights of people. So we did nothing good for the Palestinians. They get underpaid there. They can't speak what they want. They're afraid to show their pictures if they think anything different. That's number one. Nothing was created that was so beautiful and so democratic through the process of Oslo and the efforts towards a two-state solution. I wrote an article in the New York Times which laid out 5 alternatives to a two-state solution. And it wasn't my ideas. It was ideas by various intellectual leaders and politicians and professors who came up with different ideas. And I'll just speak about a few of them, not all of them. But maybe one, before I lay out the alternatives to the two-state solution, I just want to remind people something which is always forgotten in these kind of conversations. Israel is an ethnic national state. This region, the Middle East, has 400 million Arabs. 400 million Arabs in 22 countries. P.S., not one of them, not one, is a democratic country. Not one. Okay? and they live in these 22 countries in their way. And I don't want to force democracy on them because I'm not a Western colonialist telling Arabs exactly how they should live. They can live in their systems. That's fine with me. That's great. God bless them. They're my cousins, and I want them to succeed. But they have 22 countries, 400 million Arabs. We have a small country in the midst of that. I call it a protectorate. An autonomous zone of 6.5 million Jews. We've been persecuted by these Muslims for generations in their lands, and certainly they've tried to attack us and destroy us many a time here in Israel. So the first thing is that I don't consider Israel the democratic aspect of it, which you mentioned, what I said to The Atlantic, which was also taken out of context. As usual, quoting The Atlantic is dangerous because they themselves are their journalism is questionable when it comes to Israel. But in any case, yes, I actually think that Israel is meant to be a protectorate for the Jewish people first. And it's supposed to ensure that the Jewish people have rights in our land and are defended and our culture can flourish. This is the rights that are guaranteed for Arabs or other minorities are, to me, incidental to the main goal of the Jewish state, which is to protect the Jewish people. It's an ethnic national state, like all the states around us. Just for example, just right now there's a conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Both of those, one is a Turkmen state, a Muslim Turkmen state, and the other one is a Christian Armenian state. These are ethnic national states. They treat their minorities a lot worse than we treat our minorities. But the point is, this is a small, tiny island of an ethnic national state. Now, what are we supposed to do as an ethnic national state that's trying to defend its own rights and has 2-3 million people living in a part of its land, some of whom are pro-Hamas, jihadist, and anti-Israel? What are we supposed to do with these folks? Well, the simplest answer of them all is that a two-state solution was already created in the 1920s. A huge chunk of our land, which was taken and became Jordan. Jordan is Jewish land that was taken to create a Palestinian state. How do I know it's a Palestinian state? Because 80% of the people living there identify as Palestinians. So we already have a Palestinian state. It was the state that pushed in and tried to take over our land here. We pushed them back out. We say to the Arabs living in the West Bank, the majority of whom were always Jordanians until 1988, until their citizenship was taken away. We say to them, be reinstated, get your Jordanian citizenship back. Get Jordan to give you your citizenship back. You could stay here as residents. Israeli residency is a great thing. Okay, residency is something that's very beautiful. You get a lot of rights that you're protected. You get great roads, great healthcare, great upward mobility, great education. That's what I'd like to see for all peoples living in our land, minorities especially. I want to make sure that they are living well. But their citizenship, i.e. their voting, not that Jordan exactly votes, but okay, but their flight, their passports and all that will be in the Palestinian state right next door. They'll live as expats here as residents and will vote in Jordan. That's one option. Another option is what Mordechai Kedar writes. He writes, let them have their city-states, big cities like Shechem, Nablus, Hebron, Ramallah, etc. will be like self-governing city-states. They'll be living in Israel. They'll be Israeli residents, but they'll always feel that their law, their systems, their ways are the culture of that city, and they'll have some kind of limited autonomy, or more correctly, self-rule in these places, because anyway, the Palestinians are not actually one people. They're actually clannish. The Jerusalem Arabs, Jerusalem Palestinians do not marry Hebron Palestinians. It's considered shameful because they're just almost like a different people. They're related in some way, but they also see themselves as clannish, and that's their main system of self-identification. So that's two, right? One is Jordan is Palestine. The other one is city-states. Another one is very simply residency. Residency. We give non-Jewish residents of the land residency. That means that they have rights, not equal rights, because we don't have equal rights in any of their states. We're not necessarily here to, the people that came out of the Holocaust weren't like, oh my God, let's make a state with equal rights for Arabs. I don't think so. That is not what was in their mind at all. They were like, we need a state that protects our people in our land, where we always had a state for our people. And by the way, that's the way it was in the biblical times as well. There was non-Jews who respected our kingdom or our commonwealth, had rights. We had to respect them, but they were not like the Jewish people. Just like we are not given rights in their ethnic national states. So the third and simplest one is residency in the land. At the end, the real simple solution of it all, the real simple solution is strong Arab states and a strong Jewish state at its heart. That's the real answer. cooperating Arab states. Let's say all the Palestinians living in Judea and Samaria will be Jordanians, but they'll live here. There'll be a strong Jordan, a strong Lebanon, a strong Syria, a strong Egypt, a strong Iraq, hopefully. What a mess that is. Okay? A strong Saudi Arabia, a strong Emirates. And we will be in cooperation, but not to undermine the stability of the Jewish state by creating a Palestine in our heartland and creating a terror state that takes away our land and sits on our holy places, etc. That's not respectful. And the language of the Middle East is respect. The only way they're going to get respect is if they give respect. And right now they're not giving respect to our holy places and to our land. They're encroaching on our land. They're throwing rocks and other murderous objects at our citizens. They tunnel against us because we're not clear. This is our land. This is the rules. Live here and you will live in great success. If you don't want to live under these rules, get out and you'll find your self-determination somewhere else. So the truth of the matter is it's really so simple. The language that I'm talking about is the language of the Middle East. This is the lingo of the Middle East. In 56 land conflicts in this region, there's only one party out of all those 56 land conflicts which has two sides, which is like, the way we'll have peace is we'll give our land away to you. That is such a joke. That is not the Middle East way. I had a Kurdish friend working in Washington for Kurdish rights against Iran. And I said to him, you know what your problem is, bro? You should give more of your land away to Iran. Then you'll have peace. And we just started laughing because it was so absurd to give away our land to other peoples who are using population as a method of war is just a way to weaken Israel, to create a terror state, and to lose respect in the Middle East. I say be a strong Jewish state, surrounded by strong cooperative Arab states, and we'll move forward together.
How do you respond, Hen?
Yeah, sorry. No, I just want to point out again that 304 commanders, former commanders of the IDF, brigadier generals, former major general, former head of Shabak, former head of Shin Bet, and 304 of them. I don't know what they know about security, right? But they think that we should. The two-state solution is the way to go, and that what we've been doing with trying to kill this perception, this hope and dream of both people on both sides to live side by side is just it's the only way to do it will be in a way of a two-state. And I would say again, I mean, I think that it's if we're talking about peace, do we think that peace is possible if Palestinians are not equal? I heard the ideas that you have, but all the ideas are just summing up to making this population unequal and living under our control while they don't enjoy the same benefits. And yes, we are indigenous to this land, and I don't dispute our ties. I mean, I'm advocating for the ties that we have to our land. But with knowing that and remembering it, I'm saying that this should be that we should be we're powerful enough to allow these people to have their own self-determination. Do I know what it will look like? Do I know how the security arrangements would look like? No, I don't, and I'm not even going to try and debate this because there's 304 former generals in the IDF and the Israeli security forces that gave their life. 305 of them that together would. If you combine all their service together, it will be longer than the existence of the state of Israel. They know what they're saying, and I tend to believe them when they say that a two-state solution is the only way to maintain the identity of this country. And I love this country, and I love Israel. I mean, I've lived in Israel all of my life. I gave 5 years of my life to serving the IDF. I give most of my adult life to advocate for our country. And all I'm saying is just because I don't have love for the Palestinians. I don't have hate for them. I'm indifferent towards them. I feel bad for a lot of the things that happened to this community by my government. But I'm indifferent in general to this community. I don't care what will happen to them, what they will do with their lives. I wish them well, of course. But I think that's the point I'm coming from. I'm not saying it because I love Palestinians and I want them to have a country and I don't love it. I love Israel with all my heart, and I don't need to prove it, I think. But I think
I want Hannah, just I could just say, I just want to say I think we're having a discussion about policy and not a discussion about whether you and I love Israel. I think that is well established and nobody doubts that. I think within that we're having a conversation about what Israeli policy should be. But there is one point that I have to stop you for a second and kind of make. You keep on referring to the 300 generals. That is a center-left organization. That's their policy towards a two-state solution. a lot of people in our country feel differently, and an organization of other generals was created. It was called the Bitchonistim. It's called the Bitchonistim, which means the security-minded folks. Today it numbers 1,400 generals, high-level sayarot, the elite commando units, pilots, 1,400 of the same type of people who stand exactly on the other side. And you could look them up. They're on Twitter. They're fabulous. They give speeches all the time. You don't have to take my word for it. They're called the Bitchonistim. They have a site in Hebrew and in English. And so, okay, so you've got 300 on your side. There's another side. And they're very.
I would love to look into them. Are they all major generals and above? I mean,
absolutely. Because in Israel, the argument between right and left is not limited to bearded, kippah-wearing guys like me. A lot of people in our country are nationalistic, as you could see by the voting patterns. And so it makes a lot of sense that there are generals, high-level generals, etc., that are on the other side, political side. And this organization rose up specifically in order to answer the organization that you're speaking of. So really, let's leave the.
And it says 180 people. And
their membership is 1,400, and I know them myself.
So it's not brigadier generals and above, and it's not head of Shabak and head of Mossad. I mean, I can collect soldiers. I can collect thousands of soldiers that would say what I want to say, but we're talking about it's.
I don't think your 30-second research into this organization is that valuable. I think that in the end, my point to you is that you can quote other people and outsource your opinion to these so-called generals that know everything. But Israel is a democracy for good and for bad. And in our democracy, we've got generals on the right and generals on the left, politicians on the right, politicians on the left. And if we all, show whose general is let me show you, how big my general is. If we do a comparison of generals, it's a little. No, but it's not real politics. It's not real policy.
They deserve, Yishai. I mean, those people served all of their life. I mean, we're talking about brigadier generals and above. They had to serve in the IDF for at least 20 years. We're talking about head of Shabaks and head of Mossad. It's not kids, let's give them the respect. They gave their life to defend the country, and that's what they're saying.
I give plenty of respect, but I'm not a communist to salute the great founders and leaders. I'm here to think about it with an active mind, and my active mind makes it clear to me. And also, by the way, the majority of Israelis, as you could see again and again through the voting patterns and through other, even the polls that you quoted are less than 50%. Even the polls that you quoted. And the bottom line is that Israelis, as you could see by Israeli policy, forget everything else. The policy of Israel is to hold on to this land. The Pompeo doctrine is hold on to this land. Nobody's saying give this land away. It doesn't work anymore because if you give the land away, it's both wrong morally and in terms of justice, and also creates a terror state right next door. That's a proven fact. So I don't, you want to keep quoting the 300 generals? Tfaddal, that's your prerogative. To me, it's not a strong argument.
I understand, and your point about the polls. I mean, if we live in the security aspect, that again, I'm not going to quote again, but everyone can Google securities for. Commanders for Israel's security and find out who these people are, and each and every one of them are respected generals that again gave tens of years of their lives to defend Israel. But the polls that I quoted, all of them are almost 50%. We saw some change, from
50%. Right. Almost 50 is less than 50. Just making sure we say that, because that's what I said. I said less than 50.
Yeah, but definitely the majority of Israelis. That you're not arguing, right? Majority of Israelis will agree on that. The majority of Israelis
please check out my Twitter feed and check out Shkaki, who himself today says that let me just get the figure exactly.
Yeah, I know.
Shkaki says 36% of Israelis believe in a two-state solution. Hey, Hen, we can argue numbers all day long. It's not so exciting for me. I work in a town, Hebron, which on Shabbat Chai Sarah, when we read the Torah portion where Abraham purchases the tomb of the patriarchs and matriarchs, we have 40,000 people come for Shabbat, and 10% of the Knesset. 10% of the Knesset itself shows up. About 12 Knesset members and ministers show up. Okay, so
I know,
take
there's
every single Likud
movement to convince those people and to have a political control. I'm sure, because you also have representatives in the Knesset.
Is that meant to be pejorative?
I don't have that. Israelis don't have a group of people that are Israelis outside of the green line. Inside Israel don't have people that are like you do. and we can't you can't argue that. You have people in the Knesset that their only job is to make sure that you can stay in the settlements, right?
Is that a pejorative? You mean I was able to elect the Knesset members that serve my interests? Is that meant to be something bad, or is that the root of democracy?
But it doesn't make sense. But it doesn't make it as if Israelis really care. I mean, I gave you the polls from different pollsters from left to right, from 2007 to 2020, and the two recent ones.
Do you have any polls about the last Trump elections also to put
they're both showing that 50% of Israelis, almost 50% of Israelis, the majority of Israelis, over 45% of Israelis don't agree with you, and that's what you need to remember.
I wasn't very good in math in high school, but I know that I think that less than 50% is less than a majority. But that's just me. I was more of a language guy than a math guy. But as I see it, both the Knesset, which has been a right-wing Knesset for many years now, and the polls and the new polls, they all seem to say that under 50% Israeli supported. But also after the Gaza evacuation, the
by the right government, yeah.
Right. The right government means that that the people elected.
Yes,
right?
so you're waving the right-wing government as if it says that it's on your side. It's not on your side. Right-wing government just means that it's right-wing. It doesn't mean that it supports the settlements. Ariel Sharon was right-wing as they come, and he opposes the settlements. So
no, he didn't oppose the settlements. He built the settlements. He wasn't opposed to the settlements. He decided to do a disengagement in Gaza. He wasn't opposed to the settlements. That's absurd. That's an absurdity. Ariel Sharon built the settlements.
The pullout in Gaza was what was it? That was led
it was his idea and was a proven failure. It was a bad idea. It was Ariel Sharon was very sad that a man like that came to such a conclusion, but it was proven, and most Israelis believe that the Gaza eviction was a big fat mistake. I mean, really, it empowered Hamas in that beautiful land. As the Torah says, "V'timaleh haaretz Hamas," the land was filled with Hamas. So exactly that's what happened in Gaza. In any case, look, we can argue, for forever about polls and different things. But
point about Ariel Sharon, because that's important. You're representing a late prime minister, and I said in the beginning, he said, you may not like the word, but what is happening is an occupation. It's a disaster for Israel and for the Palestinians. He said that in 2003, and he did the Gaza pullout. So to say that Ariel Sharon was supporting the settlements, his actions prove otherwise.
His actions, he built the settlements. Literally built the settlements.
He was
that was one. He did it in one place, and read his article in your beloved Atlantic. In Atlantic, he says, I should have stressed more not the security needs of Israel, but the ancient connections. This was with Ari Shavit in Atlantic. Just look it up, Ari Shavit, Ariel Sharon, Atlantic, and he says, really, I should have stressed more the tomb of the patriarchs and matriarchs, how this is our founding place, how no other nation has a monument like this is where we come from, this is the root of our peoplehood. Really, to repaint Ariel Sharon, look, we don't have to argue about this. Your position is Ariel Sharon was against the settlements. I think that is absurd. Ariel Sharon was the builder of the settlements. He's one of the masterminds of it. He said, take the hilltops.
That orchestrated Gaza pullout.
Yes, and that was his great mistake and downfall. By the way, he was, some people think when I picked up.
You can't say you're right and then tell me I'm wrong. If you're saying I'm right, I'm right. It's not you're right.
No, you're right about a small part. See, one thing doesn't teach you about the rest. Did Ariel Sharon ever say that he was going to pull out of the settlements? Did he ever say he was going to pull out of the rest of the settlements? No.
Are you saying that the Gaza pullout is a small part of our history, or is it a major one?
It was a major one and a horrific mistake. If anything, I'm thankful to Ariel Sharon for being the last puller outer, because no Israeli government is going to do that again because of the stupidity of giving away our land to Hamas. Of course, by the way, I was in Gaza before the evacuation, and the Arabs on the other side of fences were saying, don't do this to us. You don't understand the slavery that we're going to be under. Who's going to take control here? Don't do this to us. Under you, we have opportunity, we have education, we have jobs, we have something. We're going to be slaves under these guys. And look what they've done. Hen, do you really want to tell me that you're proud of Israel for pulling out of Gaza and letting Hamas destroy the lives of 1 million Palestinians? Is that really like a victory for the center left? I don't see it.
I mean, my heart breaks for what's going on in Gaza, and I think if we would put out not in a unilateral withdrawal, rather than helping the side that we've been controlling and the people that we've been controlling for a long time, before we pulled out, have an agreement, a peace agreement, because this pullout was not, as you said, I agree, it wasn't smart. It had to be done better. But I just don't. I don't think you honestly believe that that people around the world will anywhere will remain peaceful when they don't have full equality. When they feel like they're
where do Arabs have full equality in any of their lands? It's the equality is a Western. Sometimes I wonder when center left people, they just talk like colonialists. Is equality even a piece of a word that's actually used in the 22 Arab countries around us? They don't live like that. They live in tribes. They live in kingdoms. They live in a different way. I don't need
a reminder. My family is Iraqi and Tunisian, and my father is a Mazzig Tunisian. He's a tribal man. I know what tribalism is.
So don't sell me. So you should stop selling me equality. When you know perfectly well that that's not the rules of the Middle East.
I don't want to be like what happened to my grandparents. They escaped the Farhud. They escaped Tunisia. You don't know what this experience is like because you didn't experience in those countries. I mean, I'm just telling you, like my family.
Even Polish Jews have heard of some persecution. I want to tell you that. P.S. By the way, half of my family, I've got family from Spain, from Don Yechie, so I have a Sephardi side also. But the bottom line, let's not show each other as persecution, okay?
They lived under Muslim oppression, and they lived in a Muslim country and an Arab country, and I know what this oppression is like, and I don't want to be like that. I don't want our country to be like that.
Hen, good news. Hen, good news.
Good news. That's not Zionism. That's what
good news, Hen. You're never going to be a big oppressor. I got great news for you. We still created the most liberal country in the whole Middle East. We are the shining beacon of liberal values. You don't have to worry. Even under Yishai Fleisher's most expansive dream, we're still going to treat our people, whoever lives in our land, really good. Okay, much better than the damn Palestinian Authority. So do me a favor, please don't sell me that the nice guy thing to do is to put them under a thuggish regime and help maintain that thuggish regime over them. I am saying it is up to me because it's my land and not theirs. It is up to me to decide.
You're not the master of this people.
I'm not the master of the people. I'm master of the land. And if they want to live in my land, they better behave by the rules.
They better behave by the rules. That's the problem. The end point is that for the settlement movement, peace is simply not a priority. The priority is that
you're right. Our rights our rights is the priority. You're absolutely right. Right. Our rights is the priority in our small land. And not this fuzzy, fuddy-duddy Western world peace. That's not the way it is around here. You have to have respect, and they'll respect you when. Of course I'm for peace, but in Judaism, the word shalom is one of the names of God. So I always tell people, don't overuse you're not supposed to take the God's name in vain. Don't say shalom too many times. Like, take it easy before you give me a whole peace. What peace did you create? What peace did the two-state solution create? The Palestinian Authority is one of the most oppressive jihadist regimes in the world. For God's sakes, you didn't create peace. You created an outdoor jail for them called the Palestinian Authority. I am saying, let them have decencies and rights under Israel, the most liberal country in the whole Middle East, and we'll hold on to our land. We'll push back on the bad guys, and the Arabs will thank you for it. When you meet an Arab on the street, when you meet Palestinian Arabs, which I do often, they say to me all the time, we just want one thing. We want Israeli residency. We want you to protect us from the Palestinian Authority, and we want an opportunity to have a job and upward mobility. I have Arabs tell me, I'll never forget this. This was in Kiryat Arba. We met at a gas station. Arab says to me, you give me residency, my son will serve in your army and become a police officer for your people in your land. We will help ensure and protect Israel. And you could see that same attitude coming from the UAE now, which is, Israel, you're an ethnic national state. We respect your boundaries. We respect your borders. Please treat the Arabs decently, the Arab minorities in your land decently. Of course we will. And we will. The whole Middle East will flourish.
Yeah,
what you're offering is jihadist control of the whole land. That's what you're offering.
It's not. I mean, you're right. The UAE and every peace deal that we had was conditioned on us not annexing and stopping the settlement building. The endpoint is very clear, and I think that we're.
And did the Israeli government just greenlight 5,000 new apartments or not? Yes or no?
Yeah, I allowed you to speak. I'll just say it again. That the endpoint is that for the pro-settlement movement, peace is simply not a priority. The international and Israeli community, everyone understand that the settlements are an obstacle to peace. And instead of denying that reality, I think we should just admit it. And that for people like the people in the settlements, I don't want to. I mean, I think from what I'm reading from you, to settle in your area and live in this land is more important for you than ending violence and then and to having people living as equal citizens in a country and having peace with them. And that's for me.
And that was a lot of twisting of words. And let me twist words right back at you. Your peace will bring war. My war against jihadism and for holding on to our land will bring peace, as is seen now through the peace deals. A thing that you're saying about the UAE stopping us from continuing to grow the settlements. The Israeli government just last week announced 5,000 new apartments, building permits in Judea and Samaria. So clearly the UAE is not so concerned about that. In fact, if you look at their rhetoric, they actually are very upset with the Palestinian Authority, not so much with Israel living in Judea. By the way, Hen, let's just make it clear. Jews are from Judea. Jews living in Judea is not an obstacle to peace. It's the truth. And truth is never an obstacle to peace. It's the way forward. And if you have a truth-based peace, where people accept the truth that you're from this land and you're going to control this land and that you're going to give decencies and rights to minorities living in your land, people will respect you. You're acting like a Middle Easterner. Sometimes, and I don't want to get personal here because you and I, we really see eye to eye on so many things, and I really do respect you very much, and I really hope that we're having a policy argument. But I do sometimes wonder a little bit why it is that you promote your Middle Eastness, your Tunisianness, your Irakiness, and yet you talk like a Western liberal, which is a total colonialist language which does not fit this place. I don't understand where you on the one hand have this I'm from the Middle East and I know what's going on. On the other hand, you talk like no Arab chief, no Jew from Judea should really speak. I mean,
you know
what you're really saying is Jews should not live in Hebron. Do you understand that?
Can I tell you why? Because I don't have the luxury of having any other passport. My family I don't have any other nationality. I don't have American nationality like
That's
you
absurd.
do. I have only Israeli nationality. My mom can't go back to Iraq. My dad can't go back to Tunisia. I want Israel to survive. I want this country to thrive, and I want it to be the best country and live in peace with our neighbors, because peace also because the fact that we didn't have peace almost took my life when I was 12. It took the life of my family members in Iraq and in Tunisia. And I want Israel to be able to protect itself, and I want Israel to live in peace with its neighbors. And because I come from a family that went under oppression, I know how horrific it is in the Middle East to live under oppression, and I don't want it to be like that for anyone else. I want everyone to be equal. And and I know that you oppose equality and oppose the ideas of peace, and you mock the idea of peace. I'm not mocking it because I have no other alternative, and I'm going to raise children in Israel that I don't want them to go to the army. I don't want them to serve. I don't know how long you served in the army, but I served for 5 years. All of my family members served in the army. I don't want them to have a mandatory army, and even if there is an army, I don't want it to be a mandatory one. I want my family and I want my kids one day to live in peace in this country, and that's all I'm about.
I respect your point, and I certainly respect your service. I myself served in the paratroopers and then Miluim many years in the elite unit within the paratroopers.
I didn't say you didn't. I just said I didn't.
I'm just saying you mentioned that, so I'll mention my bona fides about that.
That's great.
And I'm very proud. And with regarding to this passport thing, I never heard anybody say that to me, but I'll just say I do have another passport. I was never planning on going back to America. To me, maybe a Jew that chooses the land of Israel, right? Because he could have been somewhere else like New York City, like I could have been a lawyer in New York City, but instead I choose to be here. It's also a pretty high level, which is I am here by choice, not because I was forced here. And I'm certainly, to me, Israel is the greatest passion of my life. I also think that you will agree with me that it's the greatest passion of our generation. Yeah. And so, let's not doubt each other's commitment and love to this land.
No, I'm not.
And a commitment to also decency and fairness to all peoples.
But Yishai, you accuse me of being, saying, what are you coming here with those liberal ideas that you have nothing to do with this area? So I just replied. I said, I don't have the luxury or the privilege to think about anything else other than the survival of my country and the thriving of my country.
Well, the only thing is I just feel that, my worldview says to me that way of speaking and thinking is actually perceived in this region as weakness, because in a kind of sense it is a weakness, because it has a whole set of other values that intermingle and mix up what the Jewish state is all about. The Jewish state is first and foremost a protectorate for the Jewish people, and as I said before, it's a small autonomy within this region, and our first role is to protect our minority, and other countries are dedicated to protecting their minority. I as a nationalist, I actually think that our Jewish state has to, and by the way, the Torah says the same thing, it has to give decencies and opportunities to what's called a ger toshav, a resident alien, to give him upward mobility and freedoms and opportunities and medical school and whatever you want, and great education, etc. It's not going to happen under a Palestinian Authority. It's going to happen under an Israel. A bigger Israel means more rights for more people. Palestine means less rights for more people, and it means eternal war. And I really believe that we're actually seeing the two-state solution leave the scene right now. We're seeing a sea change, and the Jewish people are going to be deeply rooted, as they were in the first Commonwealth, and the second Commonwealth, and now in the third Commonwealth, in the heartland of the Holy Land, where our forefathers and mothers walked.
So I have a question for both of you. For Yishai, for you, I've listened to what both of you have said, and one of the things I struggle with the model that you're building is that for 70 plus 100 years, there's been an ethnic conflict between Jews and the Arabs. It's been going on for many, many years. And there are 2.5, 3 million, 2 million, different people give different numbers, Palestinians living there with a strong sense of identity, that if they've been engaged in a conflict for decades, the idea that they suddenly just yield and stop and take on Jordanian citizenship, but live within Judea and Samaria, I don't see how that would come about without extreme violence or more conflict. I struggle to see how they would just suddenly roll over all of a sudden and say, actually, yeah, no, we give up our national aspirations. They've got strong national aspirations, and I just can't see that going away other than force. So in terms of the peace aspect of the debate, is it possible? How do you envisage the millions of Palestinians that identify as Palestinians that have been engaged in conflict, which despise Israel in many cases? I speak to lots of Palestinians, and they truthfully don't always speak in the fondest of terms, and many do. You're right, you brought examples. I've met many Palestinians who really want peace and love Israelis, but there's a sizable proportion that don't. You mentioned Hebron is Hamasistan. I think it's a little stronghold for Hamas. They're not going to suddenly embrace this new worldview. So I can only see that coming about by force. But then on the flip side, what happens to the 600,000 Jews that live there? Do they suddenly become Palestinian citizens in your worldview? You mentioned that the pullout from Gaza was a disaster, and it was. I think we can all agree on the panel that was an absolute disaster. But what happens to the hundreds of thousands of Jews that live there today? I mean, if you're talking about the security of your people and the safety of your people, I'm not sure how many would feel safe in a future Palestinian state. And so I think that really dealing on what happens to both of these populations in both of the worldview and both of the models that you presented is I'm really interested to hear.
Do you want me to answer first?
Yeah,
Joseph, it would be helpful if you would pick on somebody to go first, just so we don't have to have
Going
that
forward,
awkward
I will.
silence.
Yishai, give us your answer.
Yeah, we're already on that. Come on.
First thing, Joseph, you're absolutely right that there's no panacea. There's no instant solving of the 100 years of brainwashing of the Arabs, and especially the Palestinian Arabs who've really started living in the West Bank since 1948 mostly. They've been brainwashed to hate Israel for a long time. You're really absolutely right about that. But the answer is clearly not to then give them a chunk of land so that they can control it with that hate and then shoot at Israel. That's certainly not the way to go. Look, I'm involved with various. You would call them peace movements. I think we call them conversations with Arabs that want a future, Arabs and Israelis that want a future together, that recognize that we're both not going anywhere. At least the non-jihadists are not going to go anywhere. And I see different numbers and different things on the ground than other people. I see a lot of Arabs that actually are tired of the conflict and have come to the most important conclusion that the Arab world is coming to, which is Israel isn't going anywhere. the wars against Israel were all premised upon the idea that Israel will be at some point erased. Some point they will, quote unquote, throw us into the sea. And they've just come to the conclusion that that's not happening. Now, when I was a kid, when I was born, the countries like Egypt and Syria and Iraq were very strong countries. They were strong economically. They had output. They were really Egyptian cotton, Egyptian tourism. Syria, Lebanon. These were strong countries. Their hate has led them all to become weak countries, economically weak countries, countries that really don't support their own people's bare minimum. In Syria, civil war, hundreds of thousands killed. Iraq is a failed state. Egypt is always on the verge of economic collapse, barely able to feed its millions. And so, they're starting to realize that their 100 years of hate has led to their own economic and development demise. And Israel, on the other hand, it's in its flourishing moment, economically, militarily, relationships around the world. And so the Arabs are looking around and they are sensing that this is just not going anywhere. We're not going to defeat Israel. Jihadism has done nothing for our lives. It's not like the old days, like in the year 637, where you could be a big jihadist army, and the more you conquer, the more you control, and the more power you have. It's not like that today. Today, jihadism leads to uneducated masses, to women who don't go to school, and suppression, all kinds of stuff like that. And they're looking around. They look at Israel. They look at the UAE. They look at other countries that are moving forward in a decent way. They have the internet, right? Because even in poor countries, you still have a smartphone. And somehow you're looking around and you're thinking to yourself, what the hell do I need this conflict with Israel for? It's a total waste of time. They're not going anywhere, these guys. And so better, if you can't beat them, let's join them. And let's have economic opportunity and prosperity. Let's have business. Let's have a life. Let's build a house. Let's send our kid to grade school and not teach them to hate Israel, to fight, because it's worthless. It's pointless. Our jihadist leaders are not only sending us to our deaths, they're also embezzling all the money that they collect from around the world for us. So Arabs are looking around and they're starting to understand this reality that's really become cemented in really the last, I think, 20 years, a realization that their civilization and societies are going down while Israel is going up. And they're starting to change direction. I think that the Abraham Accords is the beginning of a deep felt, you know how Victor Hugo said, there's nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come. And that's what's happening right now. They're realizing that it's over. It's time to cooperate with Israel. It's time to move forward. Abraham Accords is one of the most beautiful names I could have ever dreamt of or imagined, because it bespeaks of our joint of our father in common, our common father. And so I expect the Palestinian Authority to dissolve in the near future, and I expect Arabs to more and more move towards Israeli residency in other forms. And I expect the jihadists to come out of the closet. We'll fight them. We'll deal with them. But they won't win. And I think that their own societies will rise up against them and make a coup against them, because they want to move forward and live.
I did meet the gentleman you were quoting from the Palestinian, I've forgotten the research center, and he shared with me a fascinating statistic, which I'm going to misremember, but it was basically a large percentage of Palestinians between the ages of 18 and 25, and I wish I could remember the number. Maybe someone in the comments will flag it for me, would prefer to live under Israel than to live under the Palestinian Authority. And when I asked him why that was, he said, well, they look at Israel and they see the Israeli people throwing their corrupt politicians in prison, and they wish they could do that to Abu Mazen. And so I do hear some of what you're saying about the sentiment changing on the street level, but I'd also say I think you can't underplay the religious aspect of this. I mean, you keep on talking about religious fundamentalism being on the out, and when you look at, like, you've got somewhere like Egypt where I think half of the population under the age of 25 are unemployed. You've got, like, it was 75% of the population under 25. It was a staggering statistic, unemployed. You look at Syria, which has been ravaged by a religious war. You look at Lebanon, which is on the brink of influence. You're surrounded by states where religious fundamentalism isn't going away, And you both opened, that's why I asked those questions at the beginning, to see where you stood. You both opened that Jerusalem is the undivided capital of Israel. But when you're looking at the sentiment of the surrounding states who pose an actual threat to Israel, it's interesting that neither of you see them, the Har HaBayit, the Temple Mount, as a settlement, because under the international community, it would be potentially considered a settlement, because they originally envisaged it as being, well, it was Jordanian, it was conquered by Jordan. And so the religious world looks at Jerusalem, looks at Al-Quds, and sees that Masjid al-Aqsa as being central to their faith. And I think you can't also separate the religious aspect. I don't think religious fundamentalism is going away. It's on the increase. And when you have mass unemployment, people look for cause, people look for something. And they're going to latch, well, in my opinion, they're going to latch onto conflicts which have huge religious significance, like liberating the Temple Mount. That's in their words, not mine, obviously. And I guess, Hen, I'll give you an opportunity to respond to my 600,000. What happens to the 600,000 Jews that live there in your two states?
Yeah, I'm not sure where this number is coming from, the 600.
I was using Yishai, but I'll pull it up, because that's the number.
There's 600. If you count East Jerusalem, there's about 400,000 in Judea and Samaria proper, and about 200,000 in Eastern Jerusalem.
No, we're not. Okay, yeah, because according to the main Bureau of Statistics, the Israeli main Bureau of Statistics, they said that there's 441,000.
But East Jerusalem is considered by the international community also occupied.
Right, but I think we already established that that Jerusalem is going to remain.
I think it's all going to remain.
We both agree that. So, I'm saying that I'm separating this debate because we both agree that Jerusalem should remain Israel capital. I just disagree with the rest, with Judea and Samaria, and I think it's important to point out that the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, that 50% of the area, almost 50% is Area C, right? And Area A and B, where no Jews live in, is another 50%. Percent here, percent there. But the majority, not the majority, I'm sorry, all Israeli Jews that live in the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, all the settlers live in Area C, correct?
Yep.
Yeah.
Mostly, that's right. Except for a few outlying places, that's right.
Yeah, and H1 and H2, but I'm also including Area C within H2. H2 within Area C. So I think that the point is that these areas, and that's something that also, of course, we're talking about, that the main blocks of settlements will be attached to Israel. That's something that both Palestinians and Israelis agree on, that those blocks, and we're talking Ariel, Gush Etzion, Ma'ale Adumim, those areas are going to be part of Israel. No one is disputing it.
So just to be clear, those settlements are not an obstacle to peace, the big ones?
The main blocks of settlements, I think that, I don't think that they are the obstacle. In general,
so the little ones are the problem.
Yeah, the little ones are the problem. The small ones that are built specifically in strategic points to make sure that there will never be a Palestinian state, and are
like Ma'ale Adumim, which is about 40,000 people, which blocks Beit Lechem from joining up with Jerusalem. Should that be maybe evacuated? 40,000 people.
But no one is disagreeing that Jerusalem is going to be part of Israel. I think we both agree on that as well, right? And I also said that Ma'ale Adumim should be a part attached to Israel. I think it's one of the main settlement blocks that were agreed both by the Palestinians, by the Palestinian Authority, by the PLO, and Israel, that the main blocks would be attached to Israel. That's agreed. I don't think we should go back to it. But the problem is that the outposts and the communities that have been settled in specific strategic geographic locations. I don't think you would have done it if you didn't think that there's going to be challenging to get the Israeli public behind it. I think it was done to set facts on the ground, and still the Israeli public are still not buying into, even though there's a campaign that's been going on for a long time by the settlement movement to convince Israelis that the settlements are going to help them. Almost half of the Israeli population disagree with that, and about 30% are on the fence on it. So I think that the solution is pretty clear, like to attach the main blocks of the settlements and the makeup or the security arrangement of the Palestinian state. That's not something that I'm going to go into. But again, there's smart generals that know better than me what the security should be like. That know better than all of us, than all three of us, what the security arrangement of this area can be like. But they say that it works, so I tend to believe IDF generals, former head of Shabak, former head of Mossad, they know what they're talking about when it gets to security. And what will happen with a small percentage of those outposts? We'll have to make compromise. I mean, I'm sure there is a way to have an agreement with them that they will be compensated if they don't wish to live under Palestine, which I don't think they should stay there. On how they can move to somewhere else.
So let's just pick on those, because I think this is the most interesting aspect of the conversation, which is are settlements an obstacle to peace? And I think it's fair to say that they are certainly an obstacle to a two-state solution. You both have cited examples of settlements which get in the way of connecting different Palestinian neighborhoods together. You've cited A, B, and C. You've cited where the Palestinians are living, where the Jews are living. So I think it's fair to say that in terms of a two-state solution, they are somewhat of an obstacle. Do we have consensus? Do we both agree with that? Is that a fair statement? So
Absolutely. I think it's just very important to know that we have always stood against the two-state solution, and the settlement enterprise is first and foremost a return to our beloved homeland in our indigenous land where we're from. Secondarily, it's to block the very, very bad idea of the two-state solution, that paradigm that created the intifadas, the wars against us, all the attacks against us, all that comes out of the Palestinian Authority. So yeah, we the Jews, the brave Jews, the proud and brave Jews that live in Judea and Samaria, the so-called settlers, are the folks that both love their land a lot and also stand against the two-state solution, certainly.
And Yishai, what do you say to the Palestinian refugees that are telling you that they want to go back to their homeland?
I say to them, you've never had a state here. There has never been a Palestine in this land. You have right to property as long as you're not jihadist and wanted to destroy Israel. If you are called to destroy Israel and you fight a war against us, you lose your property. That's a principle of international law, which is when you make an offensive war and you lose property, you lose land in that effort, you lose that land in perpetuity. This is our land in terms of a sovereign, in terms of individuals who deserve their rights.
Sovereign, right?
What's that?
Up till the reestablishment of a Jewish state in this area, we weren't a sovereign nation there.
But there was no sovereign Palestine. Certainly the Palestinians were no
absolutely.
sovereign.
There wasn't. I agree with you that there wasn't ever a sovereign Palestine. But those people lived there, right? We both agree that these people.
Some. If you read from time immemorial, excuse me, I'm getting a little more Sprite here. If you read from time, thanks Malka. If you read from time immemorial, you'll see that she claims, and many studies claim, that the majority of Palestinians are actually great Zionists in the sense that they came to the land of Israel searching for economic opportunities. They're economic migrants. When the nascent Jewish state started creating job opportunities here. So, hundreds of thousands, and then that turned into millions of Arabs actually came here very late in the game. They will tell you different stories, but the fact is that the majority, you could just read Mark Twain's description of the land of Israel is practically empty. He counts, he sees, thousands, a few thousands.
Jewish, yeah.
That's right. And so, like this whole narrative, and that's what we're talking about here, what I call a narrative war, the narrative war that there was this, rich, huge Palestine, Israel came and ethnically cleansed everybody. It's bogus. It's a bogus story.
We agree on that, but the question is, what will we do with the legitimate claim of Palestinian refugees that were actually, whether it's their fault or not, whether they were part of the war or not, like you are saying, we want to go back to where we lived for hundreds of years. Of course, you have stronger tie, but indigeneity is not a story that you stored.
I think in the best case scenario, and I think in the best case scenario, there's financial packages that can be made. The refugees there's so many fake stories out there, so many fake documents, and the whole idea that Jordan allotted this land thief called Jordan allotted plots of land to his various people, and then now that and they never even took up this land, and now that we're back, we somehow have to compensate former Jordanians that somehow stole our land, and the king divided up. It's really an absurdity. If somebody does have a legitimate claim, I think they could go to court and get compensation, but that's it. Because this is our land, and this is, what I mean. If they ran from it and then they gave it up, maybe there could be compensation, but generally, no. That's exactly it. And we don't have status in all of the homes like your family left behind in Iraq and Tunisia. That's really the nature of the exchange of populations that happened when Israel was announced. About 800,000 Jews were kicked out, and all their property was taken from Arab lands, from the Mizrahi lands, and about it, maybe some number, it's really not certain, of Palestinians also ran. And there's an element of an exchange of population. The bottom line is that we're the sovereigns in this land. It's really that simple.
I would imagine that the majority of those that did fled from places like Haifa, Jaffa. They didn't flee from Judea and Samaria. So the issue is actually a problem for those that are living over the Green Line rather than those that are living in the West Bank, Judea and Samaria.
Yeah, some of them fled to the West Bank, to Judea and Samaria, from Haifa, from Jaffa. Some of them stayed. And some of them fled to other places for sure. But the point was to show because I want to understand. I think the big issue that I have is that a lot of things that Yishai is saying are just. I feel like I'm hearing it a lot about Israel, and I'm hearing a lot of why do you have rights for self-determination? Why? Because you were here a few thousands of years ago, but you never had a country since then. Why is our claim stronger than other people? Why when I'm speaking about our rights to live here and us being refugees and the fact that, and you're absolutely right, 850,000 Jewish refugees came from the Middle East and North Africa, and the land that was stolen from us is equal to 5 times the size of the land of Israel today. 5 times.
You're good, Hen. You're good.
Took from us. But I'm not blaming the Palestinians for that. And I know that they never existed before as a community. And I agree that in the 60s it was created, it was part of. We are in agreement on all this, but I still don't think that we can deny the fact that there are people now and that they have aspirations, political aspirations for self-determination. And I can't fight for my self-determination, for our country's self-determination, when I deny theirs.
Hen, every person that's going to come and make a claim is equal to your claim. It's absurd what you're saying. It's just because a group of people, you just laid out a better case than I did for why this whole thing is fake. And now you're saying, but at the same time, I can't deny their claim. That's why there's a court. In court, claims are decided. Sometimes there's fraudulent claims. This is not a real claim. It's not a good claim. It's not an equal claim. It's not an equal claim. I mean, listen, I have to advocate for myself. I don't care what the court says. If I go to court and I accept their rulership over me, maybe I'll care. But in this case, you know what I mean? I think that there's also the court of how things are done in the Middle East. And we fought for our land. We defeated enemies that wanted to throw us into the sea and all the stuff that you said. And not all claims are equal. Not like let's say you have Chinatown in New York and Toronto and San Francisco, and if you go there, everybody there is Chinese. They eat Chinese food. They practice Chinese medicine. They read Chinese. There's Chinese signs. They read Chinese newspapers. But if they say, you know what, now this is also self-determination for China. We want our own China here, or this is part of China. That's called sedition. So what if there's a lot of Chinese people living there and all the culture is Chinese? That's not their land. And so, yeah, there are Palestinians here. I don't deny that, but it's not their sovereign right. There's a difference between national rights and civil rights. I don't deny that Palestinians deserve civil rights. By the way, that's exactly what the League of Nations mandate said to the British, which is you're going to create a Jewish state, and it's not to deny the civil rights of the minorities living here, but the national rights are, of course, Jewish. So you give people civil rights, but you don't give them national rights. I deny, 100% deny, and you can quote me here later on, I deny that the Palestinians have a right for self-determination in this land. I do not accept that at all,
That's
ever.
what
I think it's a created lie, and I will never accede to that. It's a simple, by the way, as a avowed Mizrahi, you should know that's a negotiation tactic. It's a trick. Like, my family's starving. How could you offer me 100 shekel for this trinket? Come on, man. Like, this is a fraudulent created narrative, and now it's legitimate enough to take away your land? I don't think so.
I think to put it back to the actual framing of the debate, and I think, Yishai, what you painted, there are those on the other side who say exactly the same. The Jewish claim to the land is illegitimate. So to bring it back to peace, and I was trying to do that question. So, two-state solution. I think we've all agreed settlements do pose an obstacle to the two-state solution. I guess my final question,
and proudly so.
If we've got time, we can open up the floor. Otherwise, we can wrap up the debate. But my closing question I guess is more to you, Hen, given that you're arguing against the motion, for the motion. So, is it possible to have peace without a two-state solution? So, what I'm simply is there a world? Can you envisage a world where actually there is the potential for peace and the settlements still remain, or is the only path to peace really the two-state solution in your framing of the conflict?
I think that peace is about it's about it's about compromising. It's about finding a solution that both sides can agree on. We all agree that there's two sides here to the conflict. There's our side and there's their side. And I would quote Aaron Kotler, that he was talking about the Mizrahi Jewish refugees once, the legendary Canadian Justice Minister. And he said once that let there be no mistake about it. Where there is no remembrance, there is no truth. Where there is no truth, there will not be justice. Where there is no justice, there will not be reconciliation. And where there is no reconciliation, there will be no peace. And I think that if we want peace, peace is about justice. Peace is about reconciliation. Peace is about understanding that even if we are right and the truth is on our side, and I think the truth and history is 100% on our side. There's no denying that we were there first, that we are indigenous, that we have the right for self-determination, that we have the right for this land. All of this is true. But from this place, we also need to be able to understand that there's a whole group of people that we can't deny their rights, their national rights, when we are advocating for our own rights. It doesn't work. It doesn't work this way, and it's just not. It's exactly against the definition of justice.
So, is it fair to say that you're saying there isn't a world where there couldn't be peace without a two-state solution, and you base that on the argument for the right to self-determination for the Palestinian people? Is that a fair summary of what? So, in your worldview, that is the only. It's a binary. There's either peace and a Palestinian state side by side with an Israeli state, or there won't be peace. Is that a fair?
It's a bit lacking the nuance, but the nuance is, I think the two-state solution is, and everything is complicated. Of course, it's very complicated. Everything is complicated, but I think the two-state solution is the best way to give justice to both sides. I think that one-state solution that some anti-Zionists are speaking about is horrific for us. And I think that one-state solution that Yishai is suggesting is also horrific for us. Maybe we'll be safe. Maybe we'll live like masters of our land. But it's not. But it's going to really harm the soul of this country. And I know it. I know it from military service. I know it from my friends. I see it around me. I know that this path is not a good path for the Jewish state.
Okay, Joseph, if I may.
Please.
First thing, Hen, I wanted to say this to you for a while. You see that I was lucky enough to put up a background for this conversation. This background is, of course, you could spot in the rear there. That's the tomb of the patriarchs and matriarchs in Hebron.
Spend a lot of time there.
That's right. Which also houses the tomb of Abraham, which is the father of the Arabs and the Jews, and it was actually, according to the Torah, both Yitzchak, the next father of the Jewish people, and Ishmael, who got together and buried their joint father Abraham. And according to our sources, Ishmael kind of repented and got closer to Isaac from some of the violence that he did in the past. I think that's what the Abraham Accords is really about. I think that the Middle East is walking away. I have a new term that I'm using. I looked it up. I think I created this term, but I found that somebody used it also in like 2011 one time. But here's my new term: post-jihadism. We're entering an era of post-jihadism. And I think that you're going to see more and more Arabs come out of jihadism. I think that Palestinianism is a form of jihadism, and there is no Palestinian map of living two states side by side. They're always they're saying that all of Israel is an occupation. And I'm not saying the Palestinian people. Palestinian people are victims of the Palestinian Authority and Hamas. Just like the Turkish people are today victims of Erdogan. Just like the Iranian people are victims today of the Mullah regime. Today there are still bad actors that are suppressing people. Israel is not one of those actors. Israel is one of the best actors in the Middle East, the best actor in the Middle East. We are the only light of liberty in this region. And the way to shine that liberty more is not to give up to the jihad and their lies and give up our land and create a terrorist state that suppresses the Arabs and attacks the Jews, but rather hold on to our land, defeat jihadism, and allow post-jihadism to take root. And what I wanted to finish for you, Hen, is that you see those flags. The picture doesn't do it justice. It's actually, we have one day a year where French Jews come en masse to Hebron, over 1,000, sometimes 1,200. They come every year. There's like a certain day in the year, and they come with flags, and they're the most Zionistic, pro-Israel group of people you ever see in your life. And as you could probably guess, when we say French Jews, that also means French Moroccans and Algerians and Tunisians, because France had a great impact in those places, and so you have a lot of these. This is the kind of French that they are. They're really from North Africa, like your family, part of your family, and so. They have a clear and intrinsic understanding that this is our land, and that we have to hold on to it and push back on the bad guys that are kicking them out of France today, the bad guys that kicked them out and kept them in second-class status in North Africa, in those places. And today we have to be strong in our land and not give in to the jihad. These folks are like you in where they're coming from and their mindset. But they've come to the conclusion that let's not go half measure. Let's not make the mistake of being kind of the greatest sin an Israeli could do is to be a friar, which means a sucker. Don't be a sucker. Don't give your land to the jihad. Hold on to what's yours. You know it. It's yours historically. It's yours biblically. It's yours rationally. It's yours legally. It's yours in war. Don't let the jihad fool you into giving away more parts of it. Don't support these corrupt, thuggish leaders that suppress them and shoot at us. Don't do it. Let's hold on to our land. Give decent people, post-jihadists, let's give them opportunities, and let's have Israel in the land of Israel.
I just had a debate a few weeks ago when someone was throwing those accusations about Israel that said that Israel is horrific and our leaders are horrible. I had a debate with Ariel Gold, this woman with horrific ideas. And I'm not comparing her to you in any way. But I'm saying how when she said those things about Israel, I just felt so cringe and was like, why are you accusing my country in this, and why are you accusing my people in this way? And I think there's tons of Muslim, and as you said, I know you don't mean it's not about Muslims. You're talking about jihadists and this ideology, which is different. But there's a lot of people that, as you said, are fighting it, and I'm hopeful. I think that peace is possible, and I do think that. I'm still holding on to the two-state solution hope, and I think that to be a realist is to believe in miracles in the Middle East. And look at Israel. Israel is made out of people that believed in miracles and believed in peace. And maybe you can say that you can mock me as a peacenik with dreams of that are unrealistic, but our whole country it's unrealistic what we've accomplished. So I'm hoping that one day there will be a solution that will. That even a two-state solution will be able will make sure that your rights are not being denied and the Palestinian rights are not being denied. That's what I'm about. I mean, I think we can go on with it forever, but I think we both.
I think Hen is right. Joe, do you wanna? Oh, by the way, before I forget, Hen, I want to invite you for Shabbat Chayei Sarah. To Hebron. Now, Shabbat Chayei Sarah, like there's nothing more powerful than reading the Torah when it's open right in front of the tombs of patriarchs and matriarchs, and seeing the story of Abraham purchasing that plot of land and standing that plot of land. It's one of the most it's just a spiritual, awesome moment. It's like, there's the ancient Torah, there's the ancient, even more ancient story, there's the ancient building, and here I am, the child of Abraham. It's awesome. I'd love to invite you for Chai Sarah. Caveat, this year, because of the coronavirus, we are not doing the big festival, so we're doing a lot of online stuff and other stuff. But next year, Bezrat Hashem, when this plague is over, I want to invite you. You'll be my special guest. I'll tour you around. You can speak whatever you want. Okay, you're gonna have a great time seeing Jews from all over the world, lovers of Israel, the Knesset members, etc., coming to Hebron for that special Shabbat. With that, maybe Joseph, I think Hen and I have been on with you for now an hour and 40 minutes with great pleasure. Do you want to? I'm throwing it out to you. Do you want to ask your audience for one question?
No,
or something?
I think an hour and 40.
Thank you. Just thank you, Yishai, for the invitation. I really appreciate it.
I mean it. I can't wait to have you. We'll hook you up.
It'll
be great.
You're welcome to come to Tel Aviv. So when you come to Tel Aviv sometime, stop by and let me know. And I would love
What do you mean
to.
stop by? Are you offering me coffee or not?
Yeah. More than coffee. Coffee is nothing. I mean, you have cakes, whatever you want.
Good.
I'm feeling really left out, guys. But I'd like to thank you both.
Joseph, you're welcome in you're welcome here on this side of the pond anytime.
As long as there's fireworks. As long as there's fireworks, I'm coming. So I'd like to thank you both for giving up an hour and 40 minutes of your time. I know that the two of you have had history on Twitter. And I think one of the really interesting things for me coming from this debate is that you can have two Jews with very different opinions, but there's still that active, there's still that unity. We still have the same intention. We all want what's best for our people, and also what's best for our neighbors. We just have a different view for what's best for those on the other side. So I'd like to thank you both. I'd like to encourage all of my audience to head over to Twitter and follow them, Yishai Fleisher and Hen Mazzig. I'd also encourage you, I'm pretty sure Hen's on. Are you both on Instagram? All of it. Find them on all social media. Make sure that you follow them. And if you like videos like this, you can purchase our merch. You can donate to us on Patreon, and anything you can do to help support the channel goes a long way. So thank you. Really appreciate both of your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph. Thank you, Chen. God bless you guys. Laila Tov. Toda Rabba.
Bye-bye.